were speaking of what we have come to know as the second judge's case, the case that actually gave birth and legitimacy to the collegium system.
That's right.
The Collegium has been in much focus the last few months. It's been a point of debate between the government and the judiciary. You have become a skeptic, a critic of the Collegium that you championed in court as a lawyer. Why do you think that the Collegium is not working? Why do you wish, as you say in your memoirs, that you wish you had
Well,
lost
in
that
the
case?
first place, judges, and when I speak of judges, I mean judges of the Supreme Court, ably decide cases as they are meant to. And my own view is that judges are not competent to ascertain and decide who should or should not be a judge of the superior courts, or who should or should not be transferred from one high court to another high court. In fact, that somehow detracts from the business of judging, because the judiciary is an independent organ of the state and the sole and exclusive interpreter of the Constitution. There's no one else. And that's how our Constitution is framed.
Yes.
Everything depends upon how the Supreme Court ultimately decides a particular case. Take the present dispute about Kashmir, for instance.
Yes.
Whatever the Supreme Court ultimately says will be the final word on the Constitution with respect to the changes that have been effected. Like that. So I think it detracts from the business of judging cases. As it is, we have an overload of cases. And how to decide them, how to speed them up, are matters which are of prime concern.
When you were arguing otherwise,
yes,
in the second judge's case,
Yeah.
did you believe differently, or were you just doing your job as a good lawyer?
That was a job as a good lawyer. That's right. That's what one does, because one gets one. But the important thing to remember is that this came out of the hat, as it were, when you argued the case, because this was Justice Verma's bugbear. He said that we must have the final word with the judiciary, which I agree. The final word must be with the judiciary.
Yeah.
And in fact, I have mentioned this before, that Chief Justice Venkatachala, a very respectable former Chief Justice, had propounded after this judgment came out, that as to how a commission, a national commission, should be formed. And he had said it should consist of 5 members, 3 senior judges of the Supreme Court, 1 an outsider, the law minister, which is necessary, and a last person, an expert who has an independent view of things, which would be a rough and ready way of choosing who should be a judge, who should not be a judge, who should be transferred, who should not be transferred. And actually, the BJP government itself introduced a bill along these lines. That it was in 2003. But the bill lapsed only because the elections were called. That's all. So the new twist that was given to the commission, which was wrong, where again I appeared, and it was struck down ultimately.
Yes.
But it was totally wrong,
But
because
you know
that
what?
said that apart from judges, if there is amongst independent members, someone could veto what the judges had decided, which is not correct.
But today, what you're saying,
Yeah.
that the Collegium keeps the judges more immersed in transfer and appointment of judges than actually hearing cases.
Yes.
This is something that the government's former law minister Kiran Rijiju kept saying.
Yeah.
And it became quite a public dispute. It seems to have settled down right now.
Yes, it seems to have, but I believe that is so, because it requires, in the first place, a regular office of the Collegium, which the Collegium doesn't have.
Right.
A regular office, a whole tabulated statement of how many judgments Mr. X or Mrs. Y have delivered, what has been their fate, etc., etc. It is a very, very complicated process. It's not an easy process.
So, do you agree with the government's position or the government's diatribe against the collegium?
I'm not on the government's position. I don't know what the government's position keeps changing. My own view is that a commission, as recommended by Chief Justice Venkatachala when he was appointed
Yes.
chairman of the review, the National Review of the Constitution, is the ideal situation. That should be.